The planet Vera shone like a green gem in the darkness of space. Vast forests spread across its lands, and crystal rivers reflected the light of 3 small suns. It was a peaceful world, known for its graceful people and their ancient traditions. Among them ruled Princess Alira, the only daughter of Queen Serene. She had been trained from childhood to be strong, proud, and loyal to her people. She believed she needed no one to protect her, especially not an outsider. Months before, the Galactic Union had passed a new law that required every royal figure in allied planets to be guarded by an elite soldier from another world. The reason was simple. A string of assassinations had shaken the Union. Leaders were being targeted by unknown forces. The rule was meant to build trust between species and protect the peace they had fought to create. On Vera, however, that decision caused unrest. The people believed outsiders would bring trouble, and no one was more against it than their princess. When the message arrived that a human was being sent from Earth to serve as her bodyguard, Alira's anger filled the palace. She paced inside the Silver Hall, her long robe flowing behind her. Her eyes flashed like cold blue glass as she spoke to the council. "I do not need a human to guard me," she said. "Vera is safe. My own guards are enough." The council members shifted uneasily. They knew she was strong-willed, but the law of the Union was strict. Queen Serene, sitting on her high seat, spoke in a calm voice. "The Union has ordered it, Alira. We must obey." "It is for your safety." Alira turned away. "Then let the human come. But I will not welcome him." 2 days later, a small transport ship from Earth landed in the royal docking bay. The guards stood in rows, their silver armor shining under the morning light. The air smelled of rain and metal. When the ramp opened, a tall figure stepped out. His name was Mark. His uniform was dark gray and his eyes were sharp but calm. He looked around, studying everything without a word. His face carried quiet discipline, and his movements showed the experience of a soldier who had seen war. He saluted the Queen first. "Mark Raines, Earth Defense Corps, assigned to protect Princess Alira under Galactic Union order." The Queen nodded. "You are welcome on Vera, soldier." Then Alira stepped forward. Her expression was cold, her voice steady. "You may serve your duty, human, but know this. I do not need you." "Stay out of my way." Mark didn't react. He only bowed slightly. "Understood, Princess." From that moment, he became a silent shadow around her. Wherever she went, he followed a few steps behind. During meetings, he stood near the door. During public visits, he walked beside her hovercar. The royal guards disliked him. They whispered that humans were too aggressive and would bring danger to the palace. Alira ignored him most of the time, pretending he didn't exist. Yet Mark never complained. He followed orders without question. One evening, as the sun set behind the golden towers, Alira walked into the royal garden. The air was cool, and small glowing insects floated between the flowers. She wanted to be alone, but she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Mark standing quietly. "I told you I don't need you here," she said. "My orders are to stay within 10 steps of you, Princess," he replied simply. She frowned. "Do you always follow orders without thinking?" He looked at her directly for the first time. "I think about them, but I follow them because they keep people alive." Alira was not used to being challenged. She turned away and walked to the edge of the garden, gazing at the stars above. "Humans always believe they know better." "Not better," Mark said. "Just different." His tone was calm, without pride or anger. She didn't answer. For a moment they stood in silence, the sound of wind moving through the leaves between them. Then she left without another word, but something about his answer stayed in her mind. That night Mark sat alone in the guard post near the main gate. The Veran guards avoided him, preferring to talk among themselves. He took off his helmet and looked at the scanner on his wrist. It was a standard military device able to detect communication signals and energy waves. He scanned the area out of habit, not expecting anything unusual. But then a faint pulse appeared on the screen, repeating every few seconds. It wasn't from Vera's network. It was a coded frequency he didn't recognize. He adjusted the settings and tried to trace it, but it disappeared. He leaned back, thinking. The signal was too weak to locate, but it didn't feel like random interference. It reminded him of the encrypted channels used by mercenary ships during border wars. He made a note in his log and saved the data. He didn't report it yet. There was no proof of danger, and he didn't want to cause panic. Still, he decided to stay alert. The next day, the palace prepared for a diplomatic meeting. Ambassadors from nearby systems were visiting. The halls were filled with banners, music, and guards. Alira moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her golden crown shining under the lights. Mark followed silently, scanning the guests, noting every face, every movement. His training made him see what others missed. One of the servants near the table was carrying a tray, but his steps were uneven. His hand trembled slightly. Mark noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted to the princess. Mark's voice was firm but calm. "Stop right there!" The servant froze. Everyone turned to look. The man's face went pale and the tray fell, spilling glass and fruit across the floor. Guards rushed in and grabbed him. When they searched him, they found a small device hidden in his belt, a detonator. The guards dragged the man away as he shouted something in a foreign tongue. The crowd panicked for a moment before the queen's voice restored order. Alira stood still, her heart racing. She looked at Mark, who had already checked the area for more threats. He gave her a short nod, then reported to the chief guard. The crisis ended quickly, but the memory stayed. Later that night, Alira found herself walking through the corridor alone. She stopped when she saw Mark standing near the training yard, cleaning his weapon. She hesitated before speaking. "You saw the danger before anyone else." How Mark looked up. "You learn to notice small things when you've been in war. People move differently when they plan harm." She nodded slowly. "You saved many lives today." "I was doing my job." For the first time, her voice softened. "Still, I thank you." He gave a small smile, a rare one. "You're welcome, princess." After that, something changed between them. Alira no longer told him to leave her alone. She began to see that his quiet nature came not from arrogance but from discipline. He didn't talk much about his past, but she learned bits of it. He had fought on the frontier worlds, protecting civilians from pirate attacks. He had seen friends lost in battle and yet kept his sense of duty. He carried himself with humility, never asking for praise. One afternoon, while walking through the garden again, Alira asked him a question that surprised even herself. "Do humans always act this serious?" Mark smiled slightly. "Only when we have something important to protect." She looked at him for a long moment before turning back to the sky. "Vera is peaceful. You won't see much action here." "I hope that's true," he said. "But peace is fragile." He said it so calmly that she almost missed the warning in his tone. That night, as he checked his scanner again, the strange pulse returned. This time it was stronger and closer. Mark's eyes narrowed. Someone was sending a signal from inside the capital. He saved the coordinates and set his helmet beside him. He would investigate soon, but not yet. For now, he kept his watch. Far above the planet, hidden behind a ring of ice asteroids, a small ship floated silently. Its dark hull absorbed the starlight. Inside, a figure watched the royal palace on the screen. The coded signal blinked again. The figure smiled and whispered into the communicator. "Soon." Down on the surface, Mark stood under the twin moons, the wind cold against his armor. He looked toward the glowing towers of the palace. Something told him that danger was coming. He had promised to protect the princess even if she didn't want him. And he was a man who never broke his promise. Morning came quietly over the city of Lurea, the royal capital of Vera. 3 suns rose from behind the misty mountains, their light turning the silver towers golden. The palace woke to another busy day. Servants hurried through marble corridors, guards checked their stations, and the royal banners moved gently in the breeze. Yet beneath all the beauty, something unseen was stirring. Mark had not slept much. The signal he had tracked the night before still worried him. It had come from within the capital itself, which meant someone inside their borders was sending information to an unknown receiver. He ran another scan in the early hours, but the frequency was gone again. It was as if the sender knew when to stay hidden. Mark had been trained to trust his instincts, and every instinct told him that trouble was getting closer. Princess Alira had started her day with a meeting at the Science Guild. The guild was one of her favorite places because she admired invention and progress. Her people were proud of their art and wisdom, and she wanted to help them grow stronger through technology. When she entered the tall hall, filled with floating screens and glowing crystals, all the scientists bowed in greeting. Behind her walked Mark, silent as always. He stood near the wall while she listened to reports about new research and trade routes. To others, he looked like a statue in armor, but his eyes never stopped scanning the room. One of the young researchers presented a new communication device that could send messages across star systems without delay. The crowd clapped as the device projected light patterns in the air. Alira smiled politely, but Mark felt uneasy. He saw small modifications in the device's energy core, the kind used in military transmitters. He leaned slightly toward her and whispered, "Do you know who built that device, Princess?" She looked at him with slight irritation. "Why do you ask?" "Because its power module looks similar to a signal source I picked up last night." Alira frowned. "You think my scientists are spies?" "I don't know yet," he said, "but I will find out." The tension between them returned for a moment, but she didn't argue. After the meeting, she ordered her head scientist to have the device checked again. Mark stayed behind, examining the wiring under the display table. What he found was a tiny chip, almost invisible, hidden near the data link. It had the same pattern as the signal code he had seen. He removed it carefully and placed it in a sealed container. Whoever planted it had access to high levels of clearance. That evening, Alira confronted the guild leaders. They denied any wrongdoing, but one of the junior technicians ran away during the questioning. Guards chased him through the corridors until Mark caught him near the landing platform. The man tried to pull a small blaster, but Mark disarmed him and pinned him down easily. When they searched the man's pocket, they found a microtransmitter identical to the one from the device. He refused to speak, only muttering that Vera's rule was ending. Before they could take him for questioning, he bit down on a small capsule hidden in his mouth and fell unconscious. The royal doctors tried to save him, but the poison worked fast. The queen ordered a full investigation, and the palace grew tense. Rumors spread through the guards. Some said foreign mercenaries were already inside the capital. Others whispered that a rival system wanted to overthrow Vera's leadership in the Galactic Union. Mark kept his focus on his duty. He strengthened the princess's security team, changed patrol routes, and double-checked every entry point in the palace. The Veran guards didn't like following a human's orders, but the queen gave her direct approval, and no one dared to disobey. Alira watched all of this with a mix of confusion and curiosity. She still didn't fully trust him, yet she couldn't ignore that he had once again prevented disaster. His quick thinking had exposed an infiltration attempt that none of her own guards had noticed. She began to see him in a new light. When she passed him in the hall, she gave a small nod instead of silence, and sometimes even asked for his opinion during briefings. One afternoon, as she stood on the balcony overlooking the city, she spoke to him without turning. "You said peace is fragile. Were you talking about what is happening now?" Mark stood a few steps behind her, his hands resting on his belt. "Yes, peace gives people time to forget danger. It makes them believe nothing bad can happen again. But there is always someone who wants more power," she sighed. "I thought joining the Galactic Union would protect us." "It helps," he said, "but laws cannot stop greed. Only vigilance can." Alira turned to face him. "You really believe danger is coming?" "I know it," he answered. "The signs are clear." His calm tone made her uneasy, but she trusted his confidence. She looked over the shining city, filled with people going about their daily lives. None of them knew that someone was trying to tear their world apart. Later that week, the Royal Council decided to host a festival to show strength and unity. Leaders from several planets were invited, including human diplomats from Earth. The palace became busy again with preparation. Decorations were hung, lights were placed across towers, and airships carried supplies from every corner of the continent. Alira tried to focus on her duties, but Mark remained cautious. He ordered his team to inspect every shipment and every worker entering the palace. Some guards complained that his strictness was unnecessary, but he ignored their remarks. On the day before the festival, Mark was walking through the maintenance sector when his wrist scanner beeped again. The same coded signal returned, stronger than ever. It was coming from the power hub beneath the palace. He called 2 guards and went down through the service tunnels. The air grew hotter as they descended, the walls covered in pipes and glowing wires. When they reached the lower chamber, he found a small crate hidden behind fuel containers. Inside were explosive charges attached to a timer and a communication link. Mark's expression hardened. The explosives were set to detonate during the opening ceremony. He quickly disabled the timer and stored the device in a secure container. He then sent an urgent message to the Queen's security head. Within minutes, the palace went into quiet lockdown. The festival was delayed without public explanation. Only the Queen, Alira, and a few officers knew what had been found. When Alira entered the control room, Mark was standing over a holographic map showing the palace layout. It was placed with precision, he said. Whoever did this knows your systems well. Could it be someone from inside? She asked. Most likely, he replied. The explosives were military grade. That means they were smuggled through official channels. She felt a chill run through her. What do they want? Destabilization, Mark said. If the palace fell, Vera would lose trust in the Union. That would give your enemies the chance to take power. Alira crossed her arms. You speak as if you have seen this before, he nodded. On Earth during the rebellion wars. Same pattern. Create fear, break order, and then step in as saviors. For a long moment she was silent. Then she said softly, You saved my people again. Mark shook his head. Not yet. We caught one trap. But there will be more. That night the Queen thanked him personally and gave him temporary command over all palace security. It was the first time a human had ever held such authority on Vera. Some officials didn't like it, but none could argue with results. Under his direction, hidden scanners were installed at every gate. Patrols were doubled and secret checkpoints were created in the outer districts. Mark also placed small sensors along the palace walls to detect unauthorized movement. Despite the heavy security, Alira noticed the exhaustion on his face. He barely slept, often checking maps and codes late into the night. When she saw him standing by the balcony at dawn, watching the city lights fade, she walked up beside him. You haven't rested, he smiled faintly. Rest after safety, princess. You speak like my mother, she said quietly. She also forgets to rest. He looked at her then, his expression gentle but firm. A leader and a soldier have one thing in common. Both carry the weight of others. Her gaze softened. You are not like the humans I imagined. He gave a short nod. And you are not like the rulers I expected. It was the first time they shared a real moment of understanding. A small connection formed, built on respect rather than duty. Alira began to see that beneath his hard armor was a human heart that cared deeply for those he protected. And Mark saw in her not a proud royal, but a leader willing to learn. But the peace of that moment did not last long. Late that evening, Mark received another alert on his scanner. The signal was moving fast across the city, coming straight toward the palace. It was not a message this time. It was a ship. Through the observation window, he saw streaks of fire in the sky. Unidentified crafts were entering the atmosphere without permission. Alarms started to echo across the capital. Guards ran to their positions, and the Queen's voice came over the communication line ordering full defense protocol. Mark looked at Alira, his tone firm. They are here. The princess froze for a moment, her mind racing. Who? Whoever has been planning this, he said. Stay behind me. The sky above Vera filled with light as explosions flashed in the distance. The war that Mark had been warning them about had finally arrived. The peaceful planet of Vera changed in one night. What had been a world of song and light turned into a field of smoke and alarm. The sky, once filled with golden suns, now burned red as enemy ships entered the atmosphere. Their dark hulls cut through the clouds like knives, dropping waves of fire and thunder over the capital city. The people screamed and ran for safety as explosions rocked the streets. Inside the royal palace, the warning sirens screamed louder than ever before. Guards ran through corridors, sealing doors and guiding the royal family toward the secure chambers deep below. The Queen gave urgent commands through her communicator, her voice steady despite the chaos. In the middle of it all stood Mark, armor strapped and weapon ready, his focus locked on one goal, to keep Princess Alira alive. He turned to her and spoke with firm calm. You must come with me to the lower levels. The upper floors are no longer safe. Alira's face was pale but determined. My people are under attack. I cannot hide while they suffer. Mark stepped closer. You cannot lead them if you are dead. Please trust me. For a moment, pride battled with reason inside her. Then with a deep breath, she nodded. Very well, soldier. Lead the way. The palace shook again as a missile struck the outer tower. Dust and shards of glass rained through the hallway. Mark grabbed Alira's arm and pulled her away from falling debris. The two ran through corridors filled with smoke and frightened servants. Alira's heart pounded in her chest as she saw her home burning. Yet through the chaos, she noticed something about the human beside her. His movements were precise, his steps steady, his voice calm even under fire. It was as if fear did not touch him. They reached the stairwell that led down to the lower halls. Mark motioned for the guards to move first, clearing the path. But before they could descend, an explosion tore through the floor below. The force threw them back, slamming Mark against a pillar. His helmet cracked, but he stayed on his feet. The passage was gone. The stairs had collapsed into rubble. "We will have to find another way," he said quickly. "Follow me." They ran toward the eastern wing, where an emergency escape route was located. Smoke covered their vision, and the air grew hot. Mark switched his helmet filter on and handed a small breathing mask to Alira. "Put this on." She hesitated only a second before obeying. As they moved through the hallway, they heard the sound of energy weapons ahead. The palace guards were fighting near the main gate. Mark ordered Alira to stay behind him and advanced toward the noise. Through the haze, he saw enemy soldiers dressed in black armor, firing plasma rifles at the defenders. They were fast, well-trained, and coordinated. Their armor bore no insignia, meaning they were mercenaries. Mark took cover behind a fallen beam and fired short bursts from his pulse rifle. Each shot was clean and controlled. 2 enemies fell instantly. He motioned for the palace guards to flank right, then advanced with steady aim. Alira watched in awe. His movements were unlike anything she had seen. There was no hesitation, no panic, only focus and courage. Within minutes, the enemy squad was defeated. Mark checked the fallen soldiers and retrieved a small communicator from one of them. The device carried a coded message in an alien script. He stored it in his belt for later study, knowing it might reveal who had sent these attackers. But there was no time to stay. The ground shook again as another explosion rocked the northern wall. Mark turned to the princess. "We must go now." He guided her through the service passages, away from the main battle. The power lights flickered as systems began to fail. Through one corridor window, Alira saw the city outside in chaos. Buildings burned, airships crashed, and the horizon glowed red. Tears filled her eyes. "My people," she whispered. "They are dying." Mark looked at her but said nothing. He knew comfort would not help her now. Instead, he focused on survival. They reached the lower docks where escape shuttles were stored. But as the doors opened, they found the hangar already under attack. Enemy soldiers had breached the bay and were planting explosives on the ships. Mark pushed Alira behind a supply crate. "Stay low." He moved forward silently, firing at the intruders with deadly accuracy. Each shot hit its mark. When the enemy turned their weapons on him, he rolled behind a cargo container, reloaded, and fired again. The sound of battle echoed through the metal walls. One of the soldiers threw a grenade, and the blast knocked Mark backward. His armor absorbed most of the impact, but pain shot through his side. Still, he stood up and continued fighting. When the last enemy fell, Mark staggered slightly, his breath heavy. Alira rushed to him. "You are hurt." "It is nothing," he said quickly. "We must leave before more come." He limped toward the control panel and activated one of the remaining shuttles. Its engines roared to life. He guided Alira aboard and sealed the hatch. As they lifted off, the palace below them erupted in flames. Through the window, Alira watched her home crumble. Her heart felt heavy with sorrow. "Everything I knew is gone," she whispered. Mark adjusted the flight path. "We will rebuild it, but first we must survive." Enemy ships appeared on their scanners, chasing them through the atmosphere. Mark pushed the engines to full power, weaving between debris and falling structures. Laser fire streaked past the shuttle. He activated the defensive shields and fired back using the ship's turrets. The small craft shook under the pressure, but Mark's steady hands kept it under control. "Hold tight," he said as he pulled the shuttle sharply upward. They flew through clouds of smoke and escaped into the dark sky. Behind them, the capital burned like a dying star. Alira looked down at the destruction, her eyes filled with grief. Yet deep inside, a spark of strength remained. She would not let her people fall. Once they reached orbit, Mark set the shuttle to manual control. The ship was damaged but still functional. The communication systems were down, meaning they could not contact the Union fleet. He guided the shuttle toward a nearby moon that appeared deserted. "We will land there and make repairs," he said. Alira nodded silently. She looked at him and saw blood on his armor. "You are injured. Let me help." He smiled faintly. "I have had worse." Still, she tore part of her robe and wrapped it around the wound on his arm. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked. "You risked your life for me," she said softly. "I was assigned to protect you," he answered. "That is my duty. But why do you care so much?" she asked. Mark looked at her with steady eyes. Because every life matters. Because peace is worth protecting. She fell silent, moved by the simplicity of his words. For the first time she understood that his strength came not from orders but from belief. He truly cared about the people he defended. As they neared the moon, a sudden burst of energy hit the shuttle. The control panel sparked and alarms blared. They had been locked onto by an enemy ship that had followed them from orbit. Mark gritted his teeth, pulling the controls sharply to avoid another blast. "We are hit," he said. "Prepare for impact." The shuttle began to spin as flames streaked past the windows. Alira held on tightly to her seat as gravity failed. The ship shook violently before crashing onto the rocky surface. Dust and smoke filled the cabin. For a long moment everything was silent except for the sound of metal cooling. Mark forced the door open and helped Alira out. They stood on a gray wasteland covered in craters. The air was thin, but the suits they wore allowed them to breathe. The shuttle was damaged beyond repair. "We need shelter," he said. "There may be caves nearby." They walked through the rocky plain until they found a small cave hidden beneath a ridge. Mark scanned it for safety before leading her inside. The cave was cold, but it would keep them hidden from sensors. He set up a small field light and a portable heater from the shuttle's survival kit. When Alira sat down, exhaustion finally caught up with her. She looked at the human soldier, who was still checking his scanner for signals. "You saved my life," she said quietly. Mark looked at her. "That is what I am here for." She nodded slowly. "I did not want you at first. I thought you were only a symbol forced upon me. But now I see I was wrong." Mark sat beside her, his expression calm. "You wanted freedom? That is not wrong, but sometimes even the strongest leaders need help." She looked at him with gratitude. "You are more than a soldier, Mark. You are a shield." Outside, the dark moon stretched endlessly beneath the stars. The sound of distant thunder echoed across the empty plains. Alira watched the horizon and thought of her people still fighting on Vera. She made a silent promise that she would return and rebuild her world. And as she looked at the human who had saved her again and again, she felt a spark of hope. Mark adjusted his scanner and finally spoke. "We will contact the Union tomorrow." "I will find a way," Alira nodded. "And I will make sure your courage is never forgotten." The two sat in the quiet cave as the distant fires of war burned across the night sky. The cold winds of the desolate moon swept through the jagged rocks, carrying the faint smell of dust and minerals. Princess Alira and Mark huddled inside the small cave, the dim light of the portable lamp casting shadows along the walls. The shuttle lay in ruins outside, half buried in the gray sands. The crash had left them shaken but alive. For the first time, Alira fully realized the scale of what had happened. Her home, her palace, and her city were all under attack. And yet she was still breathing thanks to the calm and courage of the human soldier beside her. Mark worked silently. He checked the shuttle's remaining systems, salvaged what could be used, and scanned the surrounding area. His armor was dented from the crash and a shallow cut ran along his forearm, but he ignored it. Alira watched him closely, noticing the details she had missed before. The way he paused to listen to the distant sounds of the moon, how he touched every device with care, and how even in exhaustion he never let his focus slip. His discipline and resilience were extraordinary. Alira spoke quietly. "Do we know if the attackers are still following us?" Mark shook his head. "Not yet. The moon is small, but there may be sensors or ships looking for us. I will set up a perimeter to make sure we are not being tracked." She nodded and helped him arrange some of the portable shields around the cave entrance. While he worked, she studied the stars above, her mind racing. She thought of Vera, burning below them, and of the people who were now fighting for their lives without guidance. Anger and helplessness mixed in her chest. But then she looked at Mark and a sense of gratitude washed over her. She realized she owed her life to this human who had never wavered in his duty. Hours passed in silence. Mark finally settled near the cave wall, running his scanner over the remaining energy signals. He detected faint movements in the distance, likely small patrol ships from the attackers. He marked the positions and prepared a plan for their next move. Alira watched him carefully. She had refused him when he first arrived, thinking she was strong enough to face anything alone. Now she understood that even the strongest needed help sometimes. "Mark," she said softly, "how did you stay so calm when everything was falling apart?" He looked at her, his eyes steady. "Training helps, but more than that, I believe in doing the right thing. Fear does not change what must be done. You have to act." Alira considered his words. You are different from the humans I imagined. I thought you would only follow orders without thinking. But you think and you care. He gave a small nod. I care about those I protect. You are responsible for more than yourself. I protect you because I believe in what you stand for. For a long moment, she did not reply. She felt a mixture of admiration and a strange warmth she had not expected. The human before her was not only skilled and disciplined but also compassionate. In his quiet way, he had saved not just her life but the lives of countless others. That night, as the twin moons of the planet rose, casting silver light over the rocky surface, Mark prepared a small meal from the rations salvaged from the shuttle. Alira sat beside him, the cold air biting at her skin. They ate quietly, the only sound being the distant howling of the wind. Despite the danger, she felt a strange sense of peace. She realized that the human had become more than a protector. He was a companion, someone she could rely on in a world that had suddenly become dangerous and uncertain. After the meal, Mark set up a small scanner array outside the cave entrance. We need to make sure no one follows us when we leave, he explained. The attackers may have sensors in the orbit, or they may have sent more patrols. We cannot assume safety yet. Alira watched him work, impressed by his efficiency. You always seem prepared, she said. Even in a situation like this. Mark paused and looked at her. Preparedness is the difference between survival and failure. I learned that a long time ago. She nodded, understanding. Then we will survive. The next morning, they began to plan their journey off the moon. The shuttle was damaged beyond repair, so they would have to travel on foot to a hidden supply depot Mark knew was nearby. The moon's terrain was harsh, with jagged rocks, deep craters, and narrow passes. But Mark led confidently, scanning for danger and guiding Alira through the safest paths. She followed, trusting his judgment completely. As they walked, Alira began to ask him questions about his past. He spoke quietly of his home planet, of battles he had fought to protect civilians, and of his belief in duty and honor. She listened intently, realizing that his courage was not just physical but moral. He had faced choices that would have broken many, yet he had always done what was right. His strength gave her hope, and she felt a bond growing between them that went beyond duty. Late in the afternoon, they reached a small ravine. The path ahead was dangerous, a narrow ledge overlooking a deep chasm. Alira hesitated. I cannot jump that, she said, fear creeping into her voice. Mark assessed the ledge carefully. We do not need to jump. I will go first and secure a rope. You can follow safely. He moved quickly and with precision, anchoring the rope to a sturdy rock. When he motioned for her to follow, she felt a surge of trust. With his guidance, she crossed the ledge safely. She realized that without him, she would never have made it. Her heart swelled with gratitude and respect. As night fell, they found shelter in a small cave along the path. Mark set up basic defenses and made sure their fire could not be detected from above. They ate their remaining rations and rested briefly. Alira sat near the entrance, staring at the stars. She thought of Vera still under attack and of the uncertainty that lay ahead. She felt fear but also determination. She knew that with Mark beside her, she could survive whatever came next. Mark approached and stood silently beside her. We will reach safety soon, he said. And then we will plan how to return and help your people. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. You have risked everything for me, for Vera. Why do you do it? He looked at her, his gaze steady. Because someone must. Someone has to act when others cannot. That is all. Alira felt a deep respect for him. She realized that her initial anger at having a human bodyguard was wrong. He was not an intruder or a symbol. He was a true protector, someone who had proven his loyalty and courage. And she knew that she now owed him more than her life. She owed him trust and respect and perhaps something more, a bond that could not be broken by distance or danger. The next morning they began moving again. The moon's surface was even more treacherous than before, with deep craters filled with unstable dust and strong winds that threatened to knock them off balance. Mark guided Alira carefully, showing her how to step lightly and hold her weight. He carried supplies and tended to her when fatigue slowed her pace. She realized that his strength was not only in battle but in endurance and care. He was relentless in his duty, and she admired him more with every step. By midday, they reached a hidden supply depot Mark had scouted in advance. It was a small complex partially buried in rock, stocked with survival equipment and communication devices. He quickly checked the systems and found that some of the long-range communicators were still functional. They could use them to contact the Galactic Union and request assistance. For the first time since leaving Vera, Alira felt a glimmer of hope. Help was coming, and she would survive this nightmare. As they rested, Alira spoke again. "I did not want you at first, Mark. I thought I could do everything on my own. But I see now that I was wrong. Without you, I would be dead." Mark shook his head. "I am only doing my duty, Princess. That is all." She looked at him, her voice firm. "It is more than that. You saved my life, and you saved my people. You are more than a soldier. You are my shield." He gave a small smile. "And you are strong, Princess. That is why I protect you. You are worth protecting." They sat in the quiet depot, the stars shining through the open entrance. Outside, the moon was silent except for the faint wind. Inside, a fragile bond of trust and respect had grown. Alira realized that she no longer saw Mark as an outsider. He was a companion, a protector, and a friend. And she knew that together they would face whatever came next. For the first time, she felt a sense of determination that was stronger than fear. She would survive, not just for herself, but for her people, and she knew that with Mark by her side, she could face the dangers ahead with courage and hope. The small supply depot on the moon was quiet except for the soft hum of emergency generators. Outside, the jagged landscape stretched endlessly beneath the twin moons. Princess Alira and Mark had spent 2 days there recovering from the long escape. Her arm was sore from leaning on her shattered shuttle, and his armor still carried dents from the last battle. Both of them were exhausted, but Alira felt stronger than ever. She had survived because of Mark's courage, strategy, and unwavering focus. Mark sat at a portable console, scanning the outer space for any sign of the enemy. Small blips of distant ships appeared on his radar, but none were close enough to threaten them immediately. He calculated the best route back to Vera and ways to signal the Galactic Union fleet. Each plan was precise, each move measured. He had been trained for countless battles, but this mission was different. Protecting a princess was more than a duty. It was now personal. Alira approached him, her steps careful but determined. "Mark," she said softly, "how long before we can call for help?" He did not turn immediately. "I have a communication array ready, but it will take time to repair and calibrate for the distance. The Union fleet will respond as soon as they receive our signal, but it could be hours before they arrive." Her eyes narrowed. "We cannot wait too long. Vera, it is still burning. My people need guidance and the attackers may still be in the capital." Mark stood and placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "That is why I am here. You will survive, and when the fleet arrives, we will return together. Trust me." Alira studied his calm expression. She realized that she did trust him completely. This human, who she had once refused, had now become her anchor in the storm. "I do trust you," she admitted. "I see now that I was wrong to doubt you." He gave a short, faint smile. "I only did what I was trained to do, but I am glad you see that now." While Mark worked on the communication device, Alira explored the depot. She found supplies, spare armor, and energy packs. Even though the depot was small, it was well stocked for emergencies. She packed what they might need for the journey back to Vera. Each item she handled reminded her of the people she had left behind. She thought of her palace, her guards, and the civilians still in danger. The weight of responsibility pressed on her, but it no longer felt overwhelming. With Mark at her side, she believed they could overcome any obstacle. By mid-afternoon, Mark had repaired the communication array enough to send a secure signal to the Galactic Union. He coded it to include the details of the attack, the locations of enemy forces, and the current status of the princess and the depot. The signal transmitted across space, blinking faintly on the consoles as it left the moon and traveled toward the Union fleet. Alira watched the lights of the array flicker. "Do you think they will arrive in time?" she asked. Mark looked at the stars. "They will do their best, and we will make sure you remain safe until they get here." The next few hours were tense. Alira and Mark kept watch, listening to the faint signals of distant ships and watching the moon's horizon for any movement. During this time, Alira finally allowed herself to talk openly. She asked about his childhood on Earth, about the battles he had fought and the reasons he had chosen this path. Mark spoke simply, without embellishment, describing the importance of protecting others and the lessons he had learned from fear and loss. She found herself admiring not just his skill but his morality. "You are unlike any human I imagined," she said quietly. "You care about honor and duty in ways I never expected." Mark's gaze met hers. "And you are stronger than I imagined. Not because of your title, but because of your determination. That is why I protect you. You inspire me to do better." For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the generator. Alira realized that she felt a bond with this human beyond duty or necessity. He had become more than a protector. He was someone she could rely on completely. Suddenly, a signal beeped on the console. The Galactic Union fleet had received their message and was en route to Vera. Alira's eyes brightened with hope. "They are coming," she said. "Help is on the way." Mark nodded, scanning the radar. "Yes, but we must move carefully. The enemy may try to intercept them or pursue us." With careful planning, they prepared to leave the depot. Mark set a course for a safe orbit near Vera, where the fleet could rendezvous. Alira followed his instructions without question, climbing into the repair shuttle with renewed focus. Her heart no longer carried the same fear it had before. She had seen Mark in battle, and she had witnessed his skill and courage. She trusted him with her life. The journey to orbit was slow and cautious. Mark piloted the shuttle through the moon's rugged terrain, avoiding craters and jagged cliffs. Alira helped by monitoring sensors and providing observations on the landscape. Together they moved as a coordinated team. She realized how much she had underestimated him. This human, once unwanted, had become essential to her survival. As they neared the rendezvous point, distant lights appeared in the darkness. Ships of the Galactic Union fleet. Relief filled Alira's chest. She looked at Mark, her eyes soft with gratitude. "We made it," she said. "Because of you." Mark shook his head. "Because we worked together." The fleet opened communications. "Princess Alira, we are approaching." "Prepare for boarding," came the voice from the lead ship. Alira replied quickly, confirming their position and readiness. Mark guided the shuttle to a safe landing point on the flagship. As they docked, the doors opened and the crew moved efficiently to secure them and assess the shuttle's damage. Once inside the flagship, the princess was greeted by Union officers and her family's representatives. Her mother, Queen Serene, ran forward and embraced her. Tears filled the queen's eyes as she looked at Alira. "My daughter," she said, "you are safe. You survived." Alira's eyes scanned the room and found Mark standing quietly to the side. Her heart swelled with gratitude. She walked to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Mark," she said, her voice steady but warm, "you saved my life. You saved my people. I owe you more than words can say." Mark gave a faint smile. "I was only doing my duty, Princess. That is all." "No," she said firmly. "It is more than that. You acted with courage and heart. You stood with me when everyone else could not. You are more than a soldier. You are my protector, my shield, and my friend." The officers and crew looked on, surprised. The princess's words carried weight and sincerity. They had seen many acts of bravery, but the bond between her and Mark was unique. Alira turned to the queen. "Mother, I wish to honor him. He has risked everything for me and for Vera." Queen Serene looked at Mark and nodded. "Then he shall be honored. The first human to be officially recognized as guardian of Vera." A formal ceremony was arranged. The flagship's main hall was filled with representatives of multiple planets. Alira stood at the front beside Mark. She presented him with the ceremonial insignia, a golden emblem of trust and loyalty. The crowd erupted in applause, not just for the honor, but for the courage and integrity he had shown. Mark accepted the honor with humility. "Thank you, Princess," he said quietly. "I only did what was right." Alira smiled. "No, you did more than what was right. You saved worlds. You saved lives. And for that I owe you my life and my respect forever." For the first time, the human soldier allowed himself a genuine smile. He had protected a princess, survived impossible odds, and earned the trust and admiration of not just one world, but the entire Union. But more than that, he had formed a bond that went beyond duty. It was trust, respect, and friendship, something that neither fire nor war could destroy. As the fleet approached Vera to reclaim the capital and restore order, Alira looked at Mark once more. "You will stay with me, won't you?" she asked. "I will," he said. "Where you go, I go. That is my promise." The ships moved toward the planet, prepared to fight and protect. The skies over Vera would soon be filled with the hope of freedom and the courage of those who never gave up. And Princess Alira knew that she had a protector who would never falter. A human whose bravery and heart had changed the fate of her world forever. Together, They would return to Vera, rebuild the city, and ensure that peace would not be broken again. For Alira and Mark, the bond forged in fire and shadow was unbreakable, and the debt of survival was one she would carry proudly for the rest of her life.